Hello everyone and welcome to the methods lecture. So in this lecture we're going to be going briefly over methods and how methods are essentially functions built into objects. So let's go ahead and jump over to a quick presentation. Okay, so let's get a quick overview of methods. So methods are essentially functions that are built into objects. At least that's the way I like to think about them. And later on in the course, we're going to learn about how to create our own objects and methods using something called object-oriented programming, or otherwise known as OOP, and we'll use classes in order to make that happen. But for now, let's just focus on methods on objects that we're already familiar with. So methods will perform specific actions on the object and can also take arguments, just like a function. So in this lecture, it's going to serve as just a brief introduction to methods and get you thinking about overall design methods that we'll touch back upon when we reach OOP, or object-oriented programming, in the course. So you've already used methods throughout the course, but now we're actually just formalizing what we're actually doing. So methods are in the form of this syntax, where you have the object, or the variable that's referring to that object, dot, and then the method name, and then parentheses and additional arguments. Sometimes you pass an argument, sometimes you don't. It depends on the method. So you'll see later that we can think of these methods as having an argument called self that refers to the object itself. Don't worry if you don't understand that now, but just keep that in the back of your mind and you'll see how that really comes into play when we learn about object-oriented programming. And now we're going to jump over to the code. But the main purpose of this lecture, since you've already used methods, is just to plant a seed where you're thinking about methods and how they interact with objects, because when we learn about object-oriented programming, then it's going to click really well on what object-oriented programming is and how you're making your own methods and your own objects. So let's go and jump to some quick code to the Jupyter Notebook. Okay. So here's the notebook that's already laid out, and we're just going to go through some pretty quick examples, and you've probably already seen a lot of these before. So methods. Let's go ahead and see a quick example of methods on a list. So I'm going to create a simple list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And fortunately, with IPython and the Jupyter Notebook, we can quickly see all the possible methods using the tab key. So I can hit L, dot, and then tab, and here I have a list of all the available methods for a list. So let's go ahead and try out a few of them. Let's try out the one that we're already familiar with, append. And append allows us to add elements to the end of a list. So I'm going to say append. Let's go ahead and add 6 to the end of that list. And now if I check that list, there I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So again, in order to grab that list of methods, remember this only works with IPython and Jupyter Notebooks, I can click tab and I get the list. I can click append or just hit enter once it's highlighted. And then if I want to know more about the specific method, I can hold shift tab and then I get this little docstring pop up. Then I can click the plus sign and it'll tell me what it does. So from the docstring it says an appends object to end. Okay. So let's go ahead and do another one. We'll hit tab and let's go ahead and move down one so we're at count. So now what does count do? Well, let's go ahead and use the built-in help. So I can say shift tab for the docstring, and so lcount takes in a value and returns an integer, and it returns the number of occurrences of the value. So count, let's count how many times 3 appears in that list, and you'll notice it appears just once. Okay, so let's say you're using some sort of other IDE or some other coding environment that's not Jupyter or IPython based. How could you get the help on these built-in methods or built-in functions? You can actually just use the help function. So I could say help on that method and it'll output the docstring, and hopefully that will help you. So what I want you to do now is feel free to play around with the rest of the methods for a list And later on in this section in your quiz, it's going to involve using help and Google searching for the different methods on all the types of objects and data structures that we've learned about. So the only thing I want you to really get out of this lecture is to know if I want to find the method on an object, it's just a dot or a decimal point. I click tab and I have the list of methods. And then I can click shift tab to get some more information on it. Okay. So that's it for methods, just super basic. I want you just to feel comfortable calling them on the objects or data structures that you've made. And keep in mind just the syntax here and what it looks like, because when we go into object-oriented programming, you're going to feel this connection with methods and how you're actually building them out. And a lot of times in other tutorials that I've seen, that connection is lost on beginners. So keep in mind that you're calling a method on your object or data structure and then passing in arguments to it optionally. Okay, so that's it, and feel free to read up on the Jupyter Notebook if you want some more details on it. Okay, great, and I will see you in the next lecture.